Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, November 22nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The game against Michigan in 4 days. We are up in Ann Arbor as we speak right now. Kevin Noon and I talking a little Ohio State, Michigan. We just got the chance to talk to Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh and several players about the game. And I guess, Kevin, I think the big news of the day, and the news is, well, this could mean several different things, but the status of Blake Corum for this game, Jim Harbaugh was asked and just said, no update. And then offensive tackle Ryan Hayes was asked a hypothetical, if you had to play without Blake Corum, how confident are you? And in the course of his answer, said, essentially, yeah, well, he's out, so. But it was kind of, I'll pull up the exact quote, but, how did you take it when he said that?
Yeah, was he completely in the world of the hypothetical there and saying, well, you said he's out, so I'm just parroting back what you said that he's out, or was it some sort of slip? The way I took it was, I don't know if these guys are necessarily thinking about, okay, well, now I'm completely in this hypothetical. I think, he's just trying, his brain is going a million miles a second, and he's trying to just answer the question without saying anything. You just inadvertently say something. I'm still of the mindset that we will see Blake Corum. I don't think that it is in any way, shape, or form going to be a full Blake Corum. So in terms of what Ryan Hayes said, I think maybe he was just kind of in the moment of the hypothetical.
So I'm going to give you the full question, quote, not knowing what Corum's status is going to be this week, what gives you confidence that this offense can move the ball in other ways? And his answer, it was a long answer, but it included, we've planned on this, he's a great player, but I think everyone else is just going to step up with him out, and I think that we're up to the challenge. So there really is a little bit of gray area in there in terms of what did he, when you say he's out, Are you living in the hypothetical, or is he out? Yeah, I'm still sort of the opinion that I don't think it's possible he doesn't play. It's possible he plays compromised. I think the only thing that I would say is definitely not going to be is he's not going to be 100%.
No.
So, and then Donovan Edwards, what's going on with Donovan Edwards? He's been out for a couple weeks. This is potentially a very big storyline going in this game, because Ohio State, of course, has also been playing without running backs, and but Ohio State has a passing offense to lean on that Michigan doesn't have quite the same thing. Because one of the other things that was a big topic of conversation was, can JJ McCarthy do this? Can JJ McCarthy win this game if they're doing it without Blake Corum and they're doing it without Donovan Edwards? And what was everyone kind of says the right things about having confidence in him, but what was the vibe that you got?
I think that at this point it's a case of, can you win if JJ has to throw it 40 times? Well, that's going to be what we're going to have to do if that's the case, is kind of that situation. But Michigan's offense is predicated so much by their ability to run the ball when they have a healthy Blake Corum, when they have a healthy Donovan Edwards, what they've been able to do. If you remove both of those guys from the equation, then where does it stand? C.J. Stokes, Isaiah Gash they're third and fourth string, for a reason. They're not as good as the first and the second string, and that's not to say that they're not talented players, but what does that mean for what you're doing in the passing game? Because JJ McCarthy does not really have the downfield ball. Apparently he does in practice, but it hasn't translated to the game, and we've seen that in warm-ups. We don't get to see a lot of practice at Ohio State. That's just, the name of the game of how it works there. But, it'll be really interesting to see how Michigan gets the ball up and down the field if they don't have a healthy Corum. And I liken that to the fact of what we saw in the first half against Maryland with Ohio State and not having a healthy Trevion Henderson. And Henderson was out there trying to give it all that he had, but he just didn't have it.
Yeah, and you sort of saw that with Michigan. Once Corum went down, all of a sudden, Corum was so good at getting you 4, 5, 6 yards a pop. All of a sudden, you started seeing guys. He got stuffed on. I think he had a carry or two after he came back, and then C.J. Stokes and Isaiah Gash. It was just kind of all of a sudden you started to see guys getting tackled for a 2-yard loss, guys getting stuffed at the line, which is, you're just not used to seeing that with Corum out there. And Michigan didn't really have the answer with the downfield passing game. Mike Sanderstill, as you mentioned, talked about the fact that during practice, he'll hit balls downfield, and he said he's gotten victimized by downfield against Michigan. So the question then is that good news that Michigan can do it in practice? Or is that bad news for Michigan, that they can do it in practice, but they can't do it in games? So what does that say about the Michigan pass defense? Is that, is that a question about the Michigan pass defense, or is that just that the offense is almost there and they'll get there this week?
I kind of put it more toward a situation of where, I mean, they're big stakes when you're in practice, but it's not like it's the same stakes when you're playing a game. When you put the pressure on, when there's a lot on the line, and so I wouldn't say it's bad news, because it's not so much a case of Michigan's pass defense just can't defend this guy that can't get it done in games. I think it's just a case of where there's this disconnect in terms of the offense to where they're not able to quite get it there. I mean, I've seen JJ McCarthy throw balls that have been kind of in the catch radius, but they haven't been right there, and the guys haven't been able to make the catches. And so I mean, it's got to be something concerning for Michigan. And one of the bigger issues too is, okay, if we say that the running game is going to be diminished due to injuries, I'm not saying anybody's going to be out for sure. We don't know that. I mean, Jim Harbaugh said, and I quote, "No update," so we don't know anything there. But one of the guys he gave no update for was Luke Schoonmaker. And with Eric All already out at tight end, and with your number 2 tight end compromised, that's such a big part of their passing game, of where their success is, because you sit there and you look at a passing chart, and everything that JJ McCarthy is hitting is in the first and in the second levels. It's not out in the third level. So if you're losing one of your biggest weapons there, and Schoonmaker's been a leading receiver for the Wolverines in games this year, that's problematic.
Yeah, that is a problem. And one of the other things that we talked to Harbaugh about was, and some of the players as well, was their approach to this game. And the fact that for years Ohio State always was never shy about letting you know that they work the Michigan game every day, and that there's something they think about every day, and they do what they call the team up north period in practice. And just recently, it feels like Michigan has sort of embraced that rivalry in the same kind of way and put that same kind of daily emphasis on it, that coaches are talking to players about it in January. Like, this is, they're always kind of focused on their next opponent, but also the Ohio State game is always, sort of part of that conversation. That was interesting. And then he talked about this year's team, Harbaugh talked about this year's team as being happy warriors on a happy journey. That to me, happy warriors on a happy mission. That to me was, every coach has their own view, they have their own, theme of the year, and Ryan Day has really been preaching toughness for years. Happy warriors on a happy mission it's a very different kind of theme. What do you make of that? Because this is something that he's been apparently talking about in these press conferences all year.
I'm still kind of trying to process that one, because in some ways it almost sounds like you're playing with house money when you say that. Well, we're just all happy. We're just, kind of, I don't even know how to put it at that point. I mean, obviously, you had the players going out there. It's like, we don't win this game. I mean, the season loses a lot of luster and everything else. And you have Jim Harbaugh out there talking about, happy warriors, happy elves on The Simpsons. I don't know. It was really weird. And, I've talked to some Michigan fans since being up here in Ann Arbor, and there's not a lot of chest thumping. It's like, I sure am hopeful. I think we can do it, but I'm not willing to put my money where my mouth is on that. And with the talk of the happy warriors, I mean, I guess if it's something that has been the mantra for the year, as opposed to fight or whatever, whatever the one is at Ohio State in given years, so be it. But, the first thing that came to my mind were the words house money.
Yeah, and this is a team that is, they are coming off a win for the first time in this series in a decade. So it is a very different, that's a very different next year. And you think about Ohio State, how Ohio State, maybe last year Michigan had something to really prove. That was, Jim Harbaugh last year was saying, we're going to win this game or die trying. And then this year, he's talking about this as, there's no hate here. It's just, it's an honor to get to play in this game and to get to test yourself on this kind of a stage. And, he talked about this being, two superheroes fighting, where you don't really know what you have until you have, the two superheroes square off, because it's just, you're running through all the mere mortals during the season, and then now it's finally the two superheroes squaring off. Yeah, it feels, the house money thing is, you don't want to say complacency, but it does feel like, this is probably a different attitude, a different approach than they had 375 days ago.
Right. I mean, is there a level of, especially here from the end of their game with Illinois to the Monday press conference of, well, I'm seeing how banged up we are and everything else. I mean, I think in some ways you try so hard not to say something so controversial that it's bulletin board material, but you say something so weird that that it becomes bulletin board material. And the two superheroes fighting. I think there's going to be a lot of fun with that, and I guarantee you that Ryan Day will be asked something along those lines. And I pray. I may be the one to ask Jim Knowles about that, and he'll probably be like, I don't care about superheroes. I'm never about that back in Philly. But it's just going to be
Go Birds.
Yeah, go Birds. Go Coffee. I'm Coffee Man. I don't know.
Yeah, and a couple other quick things you should touch on. He was asked, Harbaugh was asked about, Ryan Day with the Hang 100 thing, and Jim Harbaugh with the Born on Third Base thing. After last year's game, he said, it's just that's in the past. It's nothing to worry about. It's nothing that's going to have an impact in this year's game. And he was asked also about, what do you tell JJ McCarthy heading into his first start against Ohio State? He just said, have at it. Just basically, embrace it. It's a big game. It's a big moment. Like, you got to go embrace that. You got to go, carpe diem, as they say in Latin.
Well, I think the biggest thing I'm going to take away from the Harbaugh presser was how complimentary he was of Ohio State. And, we're not that far removed from the Born on Third Base thinking you hit a triple. We're not that far removed. Granted, it wasn't Jim Harbaugh who said it, but talking about how untough Ohio State was last year. Josh Gaddis, former offensive coordinator, was somebody there, but I think there were some other people that chimed in echoing that. And then he's like, well, I didn't say that. That wasn't me, but, there was a lot of things in there of where they've got guys with Heisman habits. They're this, they're that. Was it just a pendulum swing so far in the other direction, not to say something so controversial, or is he looking at a team and it's like, oof, we're going to have our hands full? And and these games every year are knuckle busters. There are years where Ohio State has the better roster. There are years where Michigan's had the better roster. I think if you look 1-85 right now, there's probably Ohio State has the deeper roster at this point. Both teams have been decimated with injuries, but Ohio State has had to shoulder that burden a lot longer this year and has kind of been able to find the Dallin Haydens of the world, the Enoch Vimahis who stepped in for Matt Jones as he got hurt in the Maryland game. They've had to do this, and while Michigan certainly has not been immune to injuries, losing Eric All earlier in the year, et cetera, it may not be as out of standard operating procedure for Ohio State as it may be for Michigan. And I think, as you sit there and we get closer to the end of the week and having to make predictions, it's going to be something that's going to weigh heavily on my mind.
Yeah, Ohio State having to play without Jackson Smith-Njigba for basically the whole season, you've had time to adjust and figure out how you're going to square that up. If Michigan has to, and Ohio State's had to play without running backs, Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams missed a bunch of time this year. And so you've had time to figure out, okay, Dallin Hayden has 300-yard games now, so he's a viable option now moving forward. Michigan, with the running back situation, is not, that Corum injury last week against Illinois was a real, that feels like that is going to be a real impact on this game.
You lose Edwards for several games, but you always had Corum. Mm-hmm. You always had Corum, and they never really backed off of that's our bell cow. We're going to run him and run him and run him some more. And as people who don't cover the Michigan program, but certainly watch it with a very close eye, we've all had the conversations with Tony as well. It's like, do you think that maybe you just want to run him 20 times this game? And here we are.
Yeah, and you have to do what you have to do in order to get your wins every week and all that. But that you do wonder if you had it to do all over again if you'd want to develop that depth a little bit more. But that's a conversation for another day. We will be having plenty of conversations on plenty of days this week as we count down to the days and the hours to this week's Ohio State-Michigan game. We're going to have loads of coverage at BuckeyeHuddle.com, of course, as always, and then, of course, at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. Tuesday night, we will have the live show for the college football playoff rankings reveal. That'll be coming out. I think that's a 7 o'clock reveal.
It is a 7 this week.
We're back
Spoiler alert, Ohio State will probably be number 2.
Yeah.
Michigan will probably be number 3.
That sounds about right. So, yeah, we'll do our live show there, and I'm sure we'll be talking a bunch of Ohio State, Michigan there. And then, of course, later on this week, we'll be on this show planning to talk to Alex Gleitman about all the recruits coming into town. Try and get Ross Fulton on to talk a bunch about some of the schematic stuff. Going to be a lot to talk about this week. So make sure you are subscribed to all of our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Just search Buckeye Huddle to find all of those. Subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows. And also youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you ring that bell. We're going to have a lot of stuff coming at you this week, and you're not going to want to miss it. You're not going to want to sit around the table and talk to family about politics or whatever nonsense they're talking about. Go watch Ohio State Michigan videos and listen to Ohio State Michigan podcasts at Buckeye Huddle. So that will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.